Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I wanted to talk about the August wrap-up and the September to be read for books. I read a lot of good things in August, and I do have some good books planned for September. However, I may not get to all of them. And so the reason for that, and the reason I haven't really been active so much in the past week, is if I may take off my disguise as Mr. Nothing and come to you as Sebastian, the book lover, the father lover, the regular human being. I like the reason I haven't been so active is because in the past week, I learned that my father had died, which is very sad, and it really hurt. Like, it really sucked, and so I was like, oh, I guess I won't read as much, which is a little bit funny. Like, I had 50 pages left to go in this book, and it's just been sitting there. And it's fine. Like, sometimes life comes in the way, and we don't read as much, and I think that's fine. Considering I have things outside of this booktube channel that I am, but I thought I would just share that, and be like, my dad died, the first like real personal death I've ever experienced, and it really sucked, and talking about it here, like I think it's good. Like, it helps me, acknowledge what happened. We still don't know how he died, but it's looking like it might be heart disease or something. So just something to think about. And talking about things, admitting that we're not feeling well. That's, as someone who's very invested in mental health and mental illness and talking about psychology, like that's good. Like, let's talk about it. Let's air our feelings out. Let's highlight that. But when talking about books and stuff, it's hard to really find common ground with my dad, because he wasn't very interested in books at all. I don't think I had ever caught him reading a book that wasn't Playboy or something like that, or just a random magazine. He watched TV. He loved to play games on the computer. He wasn't very interested in books, but he did fuel that love of books within me. He took me to the library whenever I asked. My mom and my dad were very into education, so they're like, Sebastian, you gotta read. You gotta do your homework. You gotta care about that. And I think a lot of it's because they didn't have like that when they were growing up, so they wanted me to be interested in all of that, so that I could succeed where maybe they didn't. And it really appears that I might have, if you've been following my story at all. I do owe a lot of my love of books to my dad, who was willing to, support that love. And sometimes remarking, like how, you may be book smart, Sebastian, but you'll never be street smart. And like, well, book smart is the only one that matters to me. So I thought I would just, share that and just highlight my love of my dad, and maybe how it connects to my book here. If you have any stories that you want to share about your dad or your parents and what they meant to you, feel free to comment below. I think that would help me, and we could have a discussion about something other than books, I guess. So just something that's going on. I will talk about the books I have planned for September, but I might not get to all of them. It really depends on how I'm feeling over this next coming month. And I could just take a break from BookTube in general. But for me, I really enjoy making videos and talking about books and reading. And so if I were to my dad wouldn't want me to stop doing that. Is I think what I'm getting at. Like he would want me to push through and mourn him properly, but also continue with reading and learning about new things and trying to better myself. And so, I may pause here and there in the next coming month, but I should have a lot of books read and a lot of videos where I talk about what's going on. But if I don't, just understand, where I'm at. And so anyway, after talking about my dad, let's talk about the wrap up for August. I read a number of books in August. I'd have to say it's one of my weaker months, just because I read a lot of, I want to say random reads that weren't exactly, top notch. And there's one book that I'm still in the process of reading that, because my dad died, I think that changes my perception of that book. And a lot of the other books that I read, maybe I should, reconsider them in light of my dad dying, because I might have a different perspective on it. One that comes to mind is Stoner by John Williams. Maybe the ever encroaching specter of death might actually make me enjoy Stoner even more, because knowing that death is coming, does that mean that William Stoner was, lived his best life in the light of that? And that's a lot of what John Williams talks about in that book. So maybe that's worth reconsidering and maybe finding that it's even better. But on the other hand, the Princess Diaries series, I think, my dad's death and knowing how the specter of death is all around us, maybe that's made me hate this series even more, because it's we only get a small amount of time on this planet, and Meg Cabot is going to write about this. You're not even going to try your best to leave something for the world, and that's it. Come on, you're better than that, Meg Cabot. Or I like to think you are, but that's another thing entirely. So, with what I read in August, one of the books was Marvel 1602, which I thought was rather boring. I didn't think it did enough to justify its own existence, and it really felt like it was just placing all our beloved characters in a 1600 setting, and it didn't really have a purpose other than just being a fun setting. So another disappointing Neil Gaiman entry there. I also read The Octopus by Frank Norris, which I thought was intriguing. I thought it had an interesting premise, and there were a lot of good storytelling elements within it, but it had a lot of confused messaging, particularly about the fight between the ranchers and the railroad, with Frank Norris wanting to say that there's bad people on both sides. And I think that's bad messaging, because sure, the ranchers are going to extreme lengths to fight the railroad, but that's because the railroad is making them. And Frank Norris, I feel, didn't really get that, or he was too focused on the larger picture of things. And that matters, but in the smaller scale, we should consider the how the ranchers are forced to go to extreme lengths in order to fight the railroad. Not that they were already going to do that. So a lot to consider there. I also read Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese, which I thought it was an amazing book, very touching, and really highlighted the oppression that Indigenous folks faced, in this case Canada, but you could apply that to all around the globe and how they've had a lot of struggles. So probably the best book that I read last month, and definitely one that I would recommend to you out there. If you're going to take one book away from August, let it be that. I've also been reading Beauty. I don't have a video out on that now. That'll probably be the 1st of September. I'm still in the process of reading, and because my dad died, I haven't been able to finish it, and I haven't really had the energy to. But I'll get on that soon. Just something that's interesting is that I didn't think much of the book as I was reading it, but after my dad died, Beauty's relationship with her father in this story, it's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, I should clarify. But Beauty's relationship with her father does stand out to me more. And so, maybe that's something that I should put an asterisk there. Like, if I had read this prior, like I might have one opinion, but since I'm reading it, after something significant has happened to me, it's going to change my thoughts on that. So, just be on the lookout for that video. That's going to be an interesting discussion, I'm sure. I also read a number of short stories last month, including The Wife's Story by Ursula K. Le Guin, a phenomenal story. I really feel that it's innovative for its twist, and I feel like that's not like spoiling anything for you. Lots of short stories have twists, but I'm not going to tell you what the twist is. I'm just going to tell you to go read it, and that I thought it was great. Ursula K. Le Guin is unparalleled when it comes to her writing, and we should be celebrating her a lot more than we already do. I also read The Lesson by Tony Cade Bambara, which was another good short story about racism and talking about how, some people have opportunities while other people don't. And it's a very interesting way to, showcase that for children, because I think this is definitely aimed at children and definitely good for getting them to think about these sort of things. I also read Down to the Roots by a person whose name I don't remember. I thought it was a good short story. It was about mental health and mental illness, and it was another short story about fathers and sons. And so I do think that, if I had read that, after my dad died, I might have a different opinion. But I still enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, very good to read. So definitely check that out too. And I read Rip Van Winkle by Washington Irving. I enjoyed The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And I enjoyed Rip Van Winkle. Washington Irving is a very fun author. I especially like how he presents this as a real thing that happened, as he writes through his pseudonym, whose name I'm forgetting right now. But I do like how he's pretty much lying to you in order to get you to write pretty much American mythology, which might not have been its intention, but it's what he ended up doing. So go seek that one out if you haven't read it. I know it's part of like the sort of American society where we talk about that like ad nauseum, because it seems so part of us, but that's in large part due to the work of Washington Irving, which I think is pretty cool. I had another short story lined up called Lerningen versus the Ants by Carl Stevenson, I think his name is, but I've decided to forego that until next week, just because I don't want to make a video for this Tuesday. So be on the lookout for that for next week. I'll be back with Short Story Tuesday then. And then I read some poems for this month. Be sure to check out my Poetry Thursday videos. I think you would have a great time if you are a fan of poetry. So what am I going to read for September now? I've got a number of books planned out now. Whether or not I get to them, again, that's up for debate. That's up for mystery. I do intend to eventually read all the books that I'm talking about here, because a lot of them are pretty interesting. The first one is Grain of Wheat by Ngozi Wa-Thiong'o. I believe that's how you pronounce it. I looked it up online. So it's a book about the Kenyan independence and what goes on during that time period. I picked it up randomly from my library, and it looks pretty interesting. So I'm hoping it really knocks it out of the park. I especially love that I was able to find a Kenyan author. I don't think I've read any books by Kenyan authors before, so that should be a lot of fun. There's also a number of Batman comics that I probably would have gotten to last week had it not been for the tragedy in my life, unfortunately. But be on the lookout for that coming up. There's also The Wake, I think the 10th volume or the 9th volume of the Sandman series, but that's coming up, and I'm excited for that because the previous volume wasn't so good. So I'm hoping Neil Gaiman, really like picks it up with this one. This might be another collection of short stories, which again is where Neil Gaiman especially shines. I also want to read To Life. My friend and I have been sharing books that we recommend to one another in a Google Drive, and that's one of the books that she recommended. I think it's by Harold Kushner. which I haven't read any books by him. But usually she has a lot of good suggestions, and she's also thinking of becoming a booktuber. So I'm looking forward to reading that book and also that thing happening for her. I'm going to go back to my library, pick up some random books, so that's something I'm looking forward to. There's a book for book club where we're going to be reading about the period from the 1910s to about the 1930s, where there was state sponsored terrorism against Latinos in Mexico, and so that should be a very informative and eye-opening book for me. I also want to get to Beowulf. I that's been on my list for this year, and I feel it's time to finally get to that. And also Dune, as a lot of people have been talking about Dune, and I put it on my list for last month, but I never got to it. So I'm gonna get to it this month, hopefully. We'll see how I feel about that. Of course, there's always the short stories. One of the short stories I want to get to is A Worn Path by Eudora Welty, kind of a random selection, but I'm hoping it's really good. And then a bunch of other short stories from both collections and what I find online. So if you have a specific short story that you want me to check out, feel free to comment below. I'm always willing to take feedback from people, especially if you think there's a short story that's particularly unusual that you hope that someone would talk about. And so that's what I'm here for. I'm also going to read some poems next month. They might have a more fatherly kind of spin to them. I especially want to get to Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Quiet Into That Good Night poem. Because that's a particularly powerful poem, and I feel it's one way that I could eulogize my father on this channel and really share how I feel about him and share how I feel about that poem. And so be on the lookout for that as well as a couple others. And so that's really what I have planned for September. Very excited to get back to reading and seeing how I feel about that. I might not get to everything that I want to, depending on how I feel over the course of the next month. But I do enjoy this, and my dad pushed me to do everything that I love, whether it be in education or with video games or with wrestling. He's the one who introduced me to wrestling, and I love talking about wrestling. So a lot to really talk about, and a lot to get back into. So feel free to comment below if you want to talk about a specific book or comment on something that I talked about for September or for August. I would love to hear from you, and we can have a discussion about that. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this channel. I would love more subscribers, And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and parental travels. Farewell.